Everyone,
Good morning.
we're learning Mishna Sotah, Parak Test, Chapter 9, Mishnah 11. Mishabat Sanhedrin. When the Sanhedrin ceased, meaning when it stopped functioning, Batla Hashir Mibeis HaMishtois. Song was banned from places of drinking wine. Shenemar, as the pasuk states, Bashir Leishtu Yayin. They shall not drink wine with song. Okay, so now the Mishnah begins talking about when the Sanhedrin ceased to function. So here in the notes they write, citing the Rambam, when the second temple was destroyed, the great Sanhedrin of 71 judges ceased to function. Because of these tragic events, the rabbis of that generation enacted several laws that limit joy, meaning to remember this very sad event, including a prohibition against singing at a session of wine drinking. So that's what we're talking about. Singing at a wine drinking session. People get together to drink wine and they would sing, and that was a no, that was banned. And that was banned. So here again on the bottom from the Taisis Yontif they cite, the prohibition does not apply to songs that praise Hashem or relate his kindness. It is the practice of the entire Jewish people to sing such songs at weddings and other parties, even where wine is served. So we're not talking about, singing songs of praise to Hashem. We're just talking about singing. People would sing while they were drinking, and that practice was prohibited once the Sanhedrin ceased to function. Now the pasuk that is brought here is Bashir Leishtu Yayin. It's a pasuk from the book of Yeshai, the book of Isaiah, and actually that pasuk, I'm going to read to you from the bottom. The verse predicts that singing will be prohibited at meals in which wine is drunk. Meaning, the prophet Yeshaya, before the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, is already predicting that there will be this point of time where Bashir lo yishtu yayin, that they will not be drinking wine together with song. Now, the fact that the Mishnah is applying that to this situation where the Sanhedrin ceased to function. So the way they explain it here on the bottom, again citing the Bartanura, is this refers to the time after the great Sanhedrin ceased to operate. For such is derived from another verse, meaning this verse that the Mishnah brings, that they shall not be drinking wine with song, is referring to what we're talking about here, where the Sanhedrin ceased to function. How do we know? So that's based on another verse, a verse from the book of Eicha, Lamentations, where it says, the elders are gone from the gate, the young from their music. What does that mean? That is, when the elders of the Sanhedrin are gone from the gate, meaning from where they would gather to function, the young are banned from their music. So the fact that we have that pasuk in Eicha that talks about that connection between when the elders are gone, the music is going to be banned. That is what the pasuk in Yeshai was referring to when it said, B'sher la'yishta yayin, they shall not drink wine with song, and that is referring to when the Sanhedrin ceased to function, that there was this decree that was made that this practice should be stopped. And again, it was a practice, there was a practice about just singing, not singing song of praise or to Hashem or about his kindnesses. All right, let's go to the next Mishnah. Mishnah Yud Beis. That was a short Mishnah. B'shemeisu neviim arishayim batlu urim v'tumim. From the time that the early prophets ceased, that when they died, rather, batlu urim v'tumim, the urim v'tumim ceased to function, to work. Now, the first thing is, the Bartanura points out, the term early prophets includes all the prophets except for Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi and their colleagues who lived at the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. So this point of when the early prophets died, that we say the Urim and Tumim stopped to function, is talking about up to the point of time of the last prophets, which were Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, and their colleagues who lived at the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. They were still prophets. They were the last prophets, but already at that point of time, the Urim and Tumim ceased to operate. Now, when we talk about that the Urim and Tumim ceased to operate, what do we mean by that? So first of all, what was the Urim and Tumim? The Urim and Tumim was a piece of parchment inscribed with a special name of Hashem and placed into the fold of the choshen, the breastplate worn by the Kohen Gadol. Through the Urim Tumim, leaders of the Jewish people received answers from heaven to important questions that affected the nation. 12 precious stones were attached to the front of the choshen, on which the names of the 12 tribes were engraved, one name on each stone. In response to a question, some of the engraved letters miraculously protruded. It doesn't say they lit up. It says they protruded, they stuck out. With the help of divine inspiration, Ruach HaKodesh, the Kohen Gadol arranged the protruding letters into an answer to the question. So therefore, that's the function of Urim Tumim, and that ceased to function once the early prophets died. Next, Yishachar Beis HaMikdash, when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, we're talking about the second Beis HaMikdash here, Batal HaShamer, V'Neifes Sufim, Upasku Anshe Amana. So three things ceased to exist. The Shomer, we'll explain what that is, Neifes Sufim, which is a special kind of honey, and Anshe Amana, and people of faith, ceased to exist. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Hashia Hashem, Higamar Chased. Save Hashem, meaning save us Hashem, for the pious have ended. They are no more. And now the rest of that pasuk reads, for those of faith have vanished from mankind, and that's why we call them Anshe Amana, people of faith. So let's explain each one. So first we have the Shomer. The Shomer was a type of a small worm that had the ability to split stone. And why did you need the Shomer to split stone? So the explanation cited by the Rav, and here in the notes. The stones of the ephod, one of the Kohen Gadol's garments, and the choshen, meaning they both had to have this precious stones that were in the choshen, they were on the breastplate, on the ephod, they were on the shoulders, where the shoulder straps were. So those had, as we mentioned before, we mentioned about the choshen, but it's also about the ephod. Those stones had the names of the tribes engraved on them. However, the engraving could not be done with an iron tool, meaning in a regular engraving manner, because the Torah requires these stones to be in their entirety. That they have to be when they're in the choshen or whatever, wherever they are set in, b'milu oisam, when they fill, it means they have to be in their entirety. And an iron tool would remove parts of the stone. So to solve this problem, Moshe inked the letters onto the stones and placed the shomer on the inked area. The stone then split open by itself along the lines of the letters, and no part of the stone was lost. So it split open, it separated, but nothing of it was lost. And that is how the letters were formed. Now, what's really interesting is if that means the letters were engraved. But as he said before, when the question was asked to the Urim Tumim, how did the answer come out? They protruded, the letters protruded. These were engraved in the stone, but they still protruded. That's a miracle. Not that it lit up. Okay, now, the first thing mentioned, that's the first thing. Beis HaMikdash destroyed, no more shomer. Now, the next thing is, now if you think about it, it just struck me, like, the shomer was no more. I mean, what do you need it for? You didn't need it anything more. But unless they used to use it for other things. Now, next, Neifes Sufim. This is a honey that came from a place called Sipia, a place in Eretz Yisrael, was of exceptional high quality in appearance, taste, and fragrance. And once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, it was gone. The next thing the Mishnah said is, Anshe Amana, men of faith. What does that mean? These people had such trust in Hashem that they relied on Him to provide all their needs. And they gave away what they had to charitable causes, to beautify objects used for mitzvahs, and to enhance Shabbos and Yontif. So that's the Anshe Amana. They had so much faith, trust in Hashem that they basically relied on Him for all their needs, and everything else they gave away for the purpose of a mitzvah. And the pasuk that they bring down is Hashia Hashem Kilamar Chassid. This, and they bring down here from Teis Yantif. This plea was made prophetically by David HaMelech, King David, in reference to the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash, which occurred centuries later. So this pasuk, Hashia Hashem Kigamar Chassid, Shteiv Hashem, before the Chassid there is no more pious. And again, the rest of the pasuk reads, for those of faith have vanished from mankind. That is David HaMelech's plea for the future, a prophetic plea regarding the after destruction of Beis Hamikdash and the loss of these great people. Shimon ben Gamliel Oimer, Mishum Rabbi Yeshua. Shimon ben Gamliel said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, from the day that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And here on the bottom they bring down Rabbi Yeshua lived through the destruction and witnessed its consequences. From the day the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, ein yom she'ein boi klala, there is no day without curse. And the way they bring down on the bottom here, that means is each day's curse is worse than that of the day before. What kind of curse exactly this means, they don't explain. V'lo yarad hatal livracha, and no more, and dew does not descend in a way that is for a blessing. They explain on the bottom what that means is, before the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, land in which there was much dew produced large amounts of produce. But after destruction, such land produces small amounts. That's what it means. So it's clear that before the Beis HaMikdash, the dew that fell brought this kind of blessing, and then after that it didn't do it anymore. The nital tam haperis, and the taste, the flavor, has been removed from fruit. Fruit doesn't taste as good anymore without the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Yossi Omer af nital shemen haperis. Rabbi Yossi says that also removed were the shomen, which means the richness, which they explain to mean as the nutrition. The nutrition of the fruits was taken away. It means, again, its power to nourish was taken away because of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And this is interesting. This is by the second Beis HaMikdash. The second Beis HaMikdash, that was not on the same level of the first, its loss brought about all these changes and differences. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi.
How did the